Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you. It is strangely like being at home when I'm with most of you. Now, some of you don't know me, and you're just going to have to catch up really quickly, okay? So just get on board with the fact that I'm going to crack jokes in the middle of seriousness, most likely, and it's just kind of who I am. So is everybody with me? I mean, I teach 8th grade English. I teach middle schoolers. You have to be very insane to want to do that with your life, okay? So you're just going to have to get on board. Is everybody? I see smiles now. We're good. Okay. I was going to introduce myself, but Pastor Chris did such a good job, I don't have to now. So I'm Sarah. It's good to meet you. So I have been a part now for a little bit back in the States. This is almost year 3 back in the States, or completing 3. I don't know. I've lost track. And I have a lot of friends within the church, and some of those friends came to me not too long ago to talk to me about this place, this dream of Sojourn House. And so you can see there on the screen, I'm supposed to have this in my hand, what Sojourn House is. We're for women and we're for freedom. Before we go on too long, for women does not mean anti-man. I just want to make sure everybody's on board with that. Okay, so that is our tagline, and it's kind of an unlikely, I don't know, I think we have an unlikely call with unlikely people in an unlikely place. So if you're with me this morning, we're going to talk about those 3 things. The very unlikelies, the people, the call, and the place. And it reminds me of a very familiar story in the Gospel of John. I'm glad Chris told you that I was a pastor. Putting a pastor and a presentation that was already formed before them together is a dangerous thing. I'm going to really try to stick to my suggested 25 minutes. Not by him. I said I would take 25 minutes. We'll see. I'll take 25. Maybe more than that, but I'll take 25. Anyway, this is a pretty familiar text. I'm not going to read it word for word because it's very long, but if you want to make sure that I am doing justice to the gospel, you can turn in your Bible to John chapter 4, and we'll be somewhere in verses 1 through 42. So we have Jesus now has been traveling along with his disciples, and apparently he was tired and thirsty. So he goes out to a well to get water, but he doesn't have a bucket in order to get water. There is no one with him, and it is in the hot middle of the day. It's a very unlikely place for a Jesus to try to get a drink of water. And he's there seemingly alone until a woman that we know as the Samaritan woman shows up, or the woman at the well, we call her that as well. An unnamed woman who we know from church history and tradition came in the hot of the day because she was avoiding other people. Now, she might be like lots of my good friends, just an introvert that wanted to be alone. I'm the opposite of that, so I have lots of friends that are introverts. But I don't think it was just because she wanted to be alone. We'll see about that in a little bit. But I want us to recognize that Jesus was at the well first. So Jesus meets her at the well. He's there waiting for her. This is the grace of our God. Jesus shows up first before we get there. And so he's there and he's waiting, and then comes this Samaritan woman. Now we need to understand as well, Jesus, a Jew, a Samaritan, these folks don't get along. I mean, I should, if I'm taking the side of Jesus the Jew, no, I'm a Gentile. If I was taking the side of Jesus the Jew, I should say the Samaritan woman with just ugh, right? There is no love lost between these two cultures. So this woman shows up, and Jesus, in a pretty bold way, in this unlikely place, looks at the woman and says, "Give me a drink. I don't even think the gospel indicates that he was all that kind about it. He just, give me a drink. Now, culturally speaking, back in the day, that's not all that out of the realm of thought. Jesus was a man, the woman was a woman. They had very different places in the world at that point. So he asks forcefully for a drink, and the woman's like, where are you going to put it in? You don't even have a bucket. What are you doing? And then ask the obvious, why are you even talking to me? I'm a Samaritan, you're a Jew. Like, what are you doing? So this unlikely meetup right there at the well. And then as the story goes, Jesus goes on to tell her, if you knew who you were speaking to, if you knew what I could give you, you would never have to come to this well again. You would never thirst again. If you even knew who you were encountering right now, your life would be forever changed. And then they go back and forth about how the Samaritans worshiped and how the Jews worshiped. We have this very unlikely place of a well where Jesus shows up to meet this very unlikely woman. I say unlikely woman because she's not really worthy, at least in our human standards, of sitting next to the Messiah. She's not worthy of that. In fact, the text tells us that. Jesus himself points it out. Jesus looks at her and says, hey, go back home and get your husband. And she rightfully says that she has no husband. And then Jesus tells her all her stuff, her junk. The church word for this would be her sin. Straight up. No sugarcoating, no glossing over. He just looks at this woman full of compassion and says, you're right to say you have no husband because you've had 4 and the man you're living with now isn't your husband either. Jesus meets this unlikely, unworthy person, but he was there first. He sought her out. And inasmuch as it was an unlikely person at an unlikely place, it was an unlikely message or an unlikely call. Not only is she a woman, so in that day and age worth about as much as the animals. Listen, I'm a woman, I get it, but she was worth about as much as the animals back in the day. It is what it is. Let's not gloss. So she's not really worthy in their culture to be talking to Jesus. Then we've got these 2 separate hate one another cultures. She's not worthy to be next to him there. And then he's the Son of God, perfect. She's with her 5th dude at least. Not worthy in her life either. So Jesus is there, and to this unlikely, unworthy woman, he gives the opportunity to have everlasting life, to be free from the life that she had made for herself or her culture had helped her made for herself. She could be free of all of that and live in that freedom. I love that you live in a little town called Freedom, since, we're 4 women, 4 freedom. Isn't that cute? And I love that the church is called Freedom. I also love it for spiritual reasons. We were studying over at that church that I help run. We were studying Galatians not too long ago, and I came across these 2 verses. Galatians 5:13 and 14 say, you, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. You're called to be free. Love that. But do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command that Jesus himself said, love your neighbor as yourself. I love that I'm in a little town called Freedom, and I love that your church took the town name. I go to Peter's Switch Church of the Nazarene. It is literally not a town. It is literally a switch in the railroad right down the road from the church that was known as Peter's Switch. That's how we got our church name. Do what you want. I'm glad that you're in Freedom, the town. It's a better church name, I think. Anyway, I told you, I get sidetracked. I'll get back on. So we have these two, this holy of holies and this sinful, from the wrong tracks, living the wrong way woman. And there they are together. And Jesus says to her, but I can give you life. And not only that, when she receives that love from him, she runs to town and tells everybody. One of my favorite things about being a pastor over the years is that moment when people turn from their sin and turn towards Jesus. It's so much fun to see. It's so much fun to see that freedom that I've been talking about, that life that God gives us. But it's also so much fun to see that they cannot shut up about Jesus. They're going to tell everybody. It's so much fun. And she was just like that. She runs back to that Samaritan, still wrong side of the tracks, town, and tells everyone, so much so, such a change. Her countenance had even changed so much that people started believing her and encouraged Jesus to stay. And Jesus, this Jew, stays in this town where he should not be, an unlikely place, for 2 whole days. And a bunch of the town, it's witnessed in here, a bunch of the town says that now they no longer believe just because of the change in the woman, but they believe for themselves and are changed as well. An unlikely place with an unlikely person for the unlikely call. She only had the power that she had because of Jesus. She should not have been able to go around the town and tell everybody about this dude and everybody change. That should not be. She's a very unlikely person, but because of grace that sets us free. And so I hope that I'm in a room, because this whole thing goes not so well if I'm not. I hope that I'm in a room full of people that understand that we were created to be free and are free indeed in Christ Jesus. But that is not, like Galatians tells us, for us to keep that to ourselves, to enjoy that for ourselves. That is so we can love one another, to fulfill the law of the Old Testament. So I've been on this mission to do this. This is me in lots of places. So I came back from Ecuador, and honestly, I'm just the kind of person, I have some hobbies, but really I just like to work. So I'm the kind of person that needs a new thing to do from time to time. And so I talked to these crazy people, these 3 ladies that wanted to do something incredibly bigger than who they were or who they are. And so we started talking, and it just kind of fit. You were talking about places in the world that don't have churches, don't have pastors, don't know about the gospel. And that is true. In fact, when I was in Ecuador, I also traveled around for the organization that I worked for. And so I could be in Ecuador one day and the United States the next day and Europe the next day at some points. And the craziest turnaround of 3 days, I think, was I had a group of North Americans, United States young people with me in Ecuador. I led them to the middle. I didn't lead them because I can't fly a plane, but I was in charge, loosely in charge. But I took them to a little itty bitty airport where we could fly into a tribe that you can't get to them unless you fly in or you take a very long walking journey that involves having a canoe and all kinds of things. I'm not real outdoorsy, so this was out of my comfort zone. Anyway, I took them, and we get in this little bitty plane, smallest I've ever been in, scary. And they took us up and then they didn't drop us. They landed the plane. It'd be funny if they just, never mind. So anyway, they flew us in to the Rawani tribe. That's hard to say. In Ecuador. It's a pretty famous tribe if you know of Saint Nate or Elizabeth Elliot, if you know that story at all. Anyway, they're a tribe now that have all converted to Christianity, but every other indigenous tribe around them, because there's several, that live way out in the jungle in Ecuador. Now, I lived in Quito, Ecuador. It's like living in Chicago. It's a huge city. It's got all the best of everything. So it's like a first-class city in a third world country. That's where I lived when I was a missionary. That's where I was based, because they had an airport. It was easier to travel. So that's where I was based. I took a bus 2 hours, got on a small little plane for about 20 minutes, and was in the middle of a place where people had lived their whole life and didn't ever leave. So indigenous that I spoke to for the other North Americans, I spoke to a translator in Spanish. That translator took Spanish and put it to their tribal language. I mean, we were 3 times over the whole time. So I'm doing this whole thing. We go in, we hear the testimony of the folks there, of the missionaries of the past. We sang, "I decided to follow Jesus" in 3 languages, coolest moment ever. They painted us in tribal stuff, and it was great fun. It was a very good moment for us. So we get all back in the plane, we go back. I get them off onto their flight back to the States. I get on a flight to Frankfurt, Germany. So, middle of the jungle, you can't get there except for by plane. One day, about 36 hours later, I'm in Europe. Like, they've been around for a while. It's been established for a little bit. And I'm walking around. And the guides that I had, we were partnering with a church there, a church of the Nazarene there, and they were guiding us around their city. And they took me into what's known as the Red District. And in Europe, prostitution is not illegal. It's a legal entity. And so I was walking down these streets, seeing things, honestly, that I didn't need to see nor ever desired. But there we were, because there were a whole bunch of unlikely people in an unlikely place that needed to hear about the personhood of Jesus, that needed to hear about the freedom that is found, that I know. And so we're walking down the street, and we went to a brothel where my guides knew some of the women. And so we started talking. And they said, "Well, who's this Jesus you're talking about?" Now, I joke you not. I was on, you guys you're not. This is going to be bad. But this side of the building would have been the brothel. If we did an about face and you were looking this direction, one of the prettiest cathedrals I've ever seen in my life. But that woman that stood on that side of the street had no idea, not a clue, who Jesus was. So, you can be out in the middle of nowhere and not hear about Jesus, but you can be in the largest city in the world and not hear about Jesus. Just to be clear, our mission is great and wide and includes a lot of people, all in pretty unlikely places. I tell you that to say, as a third generation Nazarene pastor, I was a lot in shock that day, both from the turnaround from the middle of nowhere to a big city, and to know that God wasn't known here and God isn't known there. And in so I met a whole bunch of women. And then I went back to Ecuador and back to my life. And then I met a young lady named Diana. And Diana is really the reason that I'm a part of Sojourn House. Diana had shown up to the church I attended out of desperation for food. because her mom worked at a local brothel. And she was getting to about the age of 13 and 14, where very soon her life would have to change. And so I've done lots of things to get a lot of people to understand that slavery is alive and well. It's the third, if my data is not wrong, it is the third largest international money-making business. The buying and selling of people. So, what do? I'm free. I thankfully was born in this great United States of America where I was born free. I was thankful that I was born into a church that speaks about being free, free indeed. What do I do with now this knowledge that there are a lot of people not free? Did you know even in the United States, as far as international law is concerned, that it was not illegal to traffic people until the year 2000? Where were you in the year 2000? I was graduating from high school. That's where I was. There are some folks here this morning, and I'm glad that weren't alive then, but in most of our lifetimes, this change happened. And so I got back here and I started talking with some people that were founding this Sojourn House. Pretty unlikely people, I just got to admit. Carissa Muncie is one of them. She lives in Steinsville. She happens to be married to the pastor over at Steinsville Church of the Nazarene. So pastor's wife, a foster mom. They've fostered a lot of kids and adopted several along the way. So clearly a heart for others, but no special training in this particular thing until she met a survivor of human trafficking. Amy Meek, our president, makes a little more sense. She's a public health nurse through IU Health in Bloomington. Lives somewhere around, I don't know. She lives out in the boonies, but whatever. She lives somewhere between Bloomington and here. How's that? And she also had dealt with some folks that were being trafficked, and so had a heart for that. And then Morgan Lane, who also happens to be married to a Nazarene pastor over at Zion Community. These women who are not trained in non-for-profit business or organization had this crazy idea for this unlikely call in an unlikely place. Chris told you that we're based in Steinsville. We're based in the old Steinsville Elementary School. Can you imagine? When they went to the town board and said, hey, this is what we want to do with this building, the board of trustees went, I'm sorry, what? You said what? So if I haven't been clear, I'm trying to be age sensitive, but if I haven't been clear, human trafficking often happens with the buying and selling of women, particularly for the use of their body. How's that? And as free people, that is just unacceptable. And so, having met some survivors, they said, this is what we want to do to a town board, just a normal town board, no necessarily religious affiliation. They didn't come to a church and ask them to sponsor it. They talked to a town board. It's a little different. And so the town board was like, wait, doesn't that usually come with pimps and drugs and prostitution and list all the things? And they were like, well, yeah, but this is our plan. So Sojourn, we got our name Sojourn House because it's a temporary stay. We see that a lot in the Bible where people have temporary stays. And so what we want to do is attract women who have been trafficked at some point. They are drug-free, so we're not going to be a rehab facility. We ask that that happens before us. And they have to be 18 or older. So those would be the women that we would be working with. The thing is, there's a difference between what we hear in the news and what we see in Hollywood about human trafficking and the reality of it. Liam Neeson is one of my favorite actors because he always wins. And he has portrayed some always winning things in Hollywood. The fact of the matter is, friends, it's not like a beautiful blonde, blue-eyed girl is walking down the street and somebody takes them off the street and then takes them to an awful place, most likely. That's not how this most likely happens. So the reality of human trafficking is there's a lot of it, and there's a lot of it in Indiana. We happen to be in the middle of our country, right? Where lots of roads were known as crossroads, right? So lots of roads. And so it's very easy to traffic through our state. And so it's easy to find victims here. So it's not like what you see in Hollywood movies, but a victim of trafficking looks like a lot someone that's about 13. Just going to pause for a second. I teach 13 and 14-year-olds during the school year at a middle school. So the average age of entry to human trafficking is 13. It's often a child, both male and female. We're focusing on females, but both male and female that have been abused or neglected at home. And a lot of human trafficking victims come from foster care. 60%, actually. And in Indiana, if you didn't know, we have a foster care issue as well. So again, we're at this really perfect, unfortunately, place for this to happen a lot. So what's being done about this? Well, there's law enforcement. Police in Indiana are being more and more trained on how to spot a victim, how to work with victims, how to find places for victims. And that, I say, great and amen. They're doing great work. There are safe houses when someone is being transitioned out. And then there's transitional housing, which is where Sojourn House finds itself. We'll be right there. And so here's our plan. We'll have this woman, and she'll come and she'll receive 24 months or 2 years of personal care that is safe and paid for. And we have a way to restoration, which we call pathways. And so these are our three main things that we're focused on. So that pathways that I'm talking about looks a little bit like those arrows that you see. That whole 24 months, that woman, and beyond, that's why there's an arrow, that woman's going to be healing from the trauma. And then we'll add education. We'll do what Jesus did and meet that woman where she is. So if she didn't finish high school, we'll start there. If she has an idea of where she wants to go career-wise but needs education, we'll start there. We'll partner with her to get those things done. And then we'll work with her for a career. We'll teach her things like budgeting and how to get a rent paid for and how to get a car and how to get insurance, all of the things, right? And then eventually we hope that but this woman graduates. And when she graduates, she'll still have 6 months of aftercare where we'll check in through our programming. And so then we'll have this joyous celebration with this woman who has made it through a program. And so that leads me to you. Sorry about this particular slide. There's a couple where my pictures didn't work, but you've got a couple there. That brings me to you. I am so unlikely to be helping with something like this. I know nothing of the lives of these women from personal experience. And I thank the Lord that I don't, honestly. But the numbers show me, and my students that come through that happen to be in foster care show me, that it is very prevalent. And so being involved for me looked like, oh, you've ran a non-for-profit? You could come help us. So I said, okay. And that's what I'm doing. That's what it looks like for me. But for some folks, maybe some folks here, it might look like helping us renovate elementary school wing to be rooms where people can stay. And so you can see some folks, hopefully in those pictures, doing that. It could look like you have a particular skill that you could lend towards our mission. It could look like financially supporting our mission. Like I said, we want these ladies to come and not have to worry about the money piece of that to stay in a safe place for 2 years. Obviously, then we'd need professionals. I am not a counselor. We would need professionals to help these ladies as well. And so while we're partnering with community helps, we'd also need case managers. Speaking of which, our very first employee starts Tuesday. We've been working at this thing for nearly 2 years. Our very first employee starts Tuesday. I'm excited. You don't have to be. And she is coming to be a case manager, and we're so excited about the work. If you want to pray about something, that's something you could pray about. She's moving her whole family from Maryland to come to Indiana to do this with us. Brave soul. Brave soul. She's fantastic. So, we're unlikely people. Steinsville Old Elementary School, that's now a community center, is an unlikely place. And it's an unlikely call for most of us that have had the privilege of better upbringing than some. But you could very well be the unlikely people that join us on an unlikely call. And so there are lots of ways, like I mentioned before, where you can volunteer. We have our very first ever volunteer orientation happening this Saturday at 10. Now, you might not be ready to jump that far in. I'm just saying, if God is stirring your heart and you want to jump in, you got some time on Saturday, you could come over to Steinsville and learn all about it. And so if you want to do that, you can find all that information on our website. I'm going to say our website a lot now, so just buckle up. It's happening. All right. Another way that you could help is we're having a 5K run for freedom on September 10th. What's funny about that is if you know me well enough, you know there are exactly two reasons that I would ever run for anything. Someone's chasing me, or a child is in danger, period. Those are the two, that's it. So I'm crazy enough to say I'm going to do a couch to 5K, and I'm running that thing as long as we have enough volunteers. So if you want to come just see that entertainment, you can come on out on the 10th. If you want to help by handing out water or being there, we'd love to see you that night. We're really focusing, raising funds for having a director for our facility. We've received, thanks be to God, a lot of grants that have helped us or are helping us get a remodel done, but we still need some staff, and so that's what we're doing that particular day. And so these are the ways you can connect with us. There's the website, so sojournhousewomen.org. Everything you need to know is at sojournhousewomen.org. In fact, I'm going to ask Pastor Chris, if you don't want one, I'm not going to be offended, but this is a brochure and all this information is in it, and it'll help you know. So then we're also on Facebook and Instagram if you are those types of people. There's a nice pretty picture on this one too of myself, Carissa, Morgan, Amy, and Kelly. The 5 of us form the board of Sojourn House. Really, we'd love for you to consider helping in any way that you can. We've had church groups come in. We are going to do some renovation. I know from experience, some of you have experience in that kind of thing. So If you would like to volunteer, the best way is by the website. And if you would like to give, the best way to do that is by website as well. I want to thank you all for bearing with me. This is the first time I've done this, presented this particular thing, so thank you for being that for me. And I wanted to say thanks from the bottom of our hearts, supporting, just giving me this space to talk to you about this. But mostly, I want to thank you for what will be the graduates of Sojourn House. I started to tell you about Diana and got diverted. That happens a lot with me. I met Diana in Ecuador, like I said. Her mom worked at the local brothel, and Diana came to our church to try to avoid that life. Unfortunately, the power of darkness is still very powerful, and Diana will DM me from time to time on Instagram, and she is working with her mom now. I don't want to tell Diana's story. I want to tell story of freedom. And I can't be in Ecuador anymore, literally cannot. So I can't help Diana, but I've got 4 people from that local church that literally feed her on a regular basis. And so I pray into that, and I am trusting that God will free her of that. In the meantime, what I can do is I can be a part of this that will help other people here be free from all this. So, from those future women who have graduated the Sojourn House, thank you so much for your time. All right. I like to leave room for questions because that was a whole lot of information and hopefully a little bit, not too bad, a little bit of time. So do you have any, if I glossed over something or if you have any questions at all, I'd be happy to answer them here in this forum or later if you don't want to right now. Any questions? I have really good wait time because I'm a middle school English teacher. So, any questions? But I won't stay too long. All right. Again, thank you very much for letting me be here in a comfortable spot, being that it's you, and giving me your full attention. I very much appreciate it. Thanks.